I am Ben Brady, and I'm an Ordinand within the Diocese of Manchester, and I'm here with Reverend Canon Nick Smeeton, who for his sins, I think, he's my Director of Ordinands, or my DDO, Diocesan Director of Ordinands, and plays a big part in the diocese. Nick, it was interesting, as I said to you before, when you first were appointed to the post of Director of Vocations, you said that you wanted to build on what's already been achieved in Manchester Diocese, and you wanted to grow, you'd like to see more BAME candidates. Now, that was 3 years ago, and why, for instance? Why BAME?
Well, I think I didn't just say BAME, actually. There were other areas where we're underrepresented, but I think there's three sides to this, really, for me. The first is, and this is always the case with vocations, that if we discern that God is calling someone to ministry, we are required to move heaven and earth to enable them to flourish in that ministry and to fulfill that ministry. So, and that really underpins all of vocations work and everything we do. But BAME is different in the sense that I think there's a real justice issue here, and that if the Church of England and the Church more widely can't be seen to be getting this right, then it's very difficult for us to speak prophetically into other places. So I think that's really important. But there is a third side to this, Ben, and it's perhaps the one we don't recognise the most often, but it's so important. And that is that as you increase the diversity of the people coming into ministry, that is brilliant for the church. You bring in people with different perspectives, different outlooks, different way of thinking about things, different approaches, and it can only be good. So it's not just about doing the right thing. It's also that there's a huge cost to us if we don't get this right.
I think that is true. I mean, I remember when I first came to the diocese, I was from the Isle of Man, so it's quite white and Celtic. And I remember you sitting, we were all gathered at Church House, me and my the team's participants, and you were going around. We had to sit with our all the people that were going to look after us, our incumbents, so training incumbents, and we didn't know where we were going. And I remember saying to myself on the plane, because I had to fly over that morning, if I'm placed in Moss Side and Whalley Range, I'm not coming. And the way it worked out was me and my three colleagues, I was the last one, and so you went from left to right, and I was on the far right, and it was sod's law by the third person I knew where I was going. And I knew it was going to be Moss Side, which was going to be very diverse, very challenging. But it was, for me, when I remember saying to you afterwards, is there a change? Is there a scope looking at having a change and going somewhere else? And you went, no. That was the end of that. And actually, that was the best thing for me. And I think I'm very proud of our diocese and what it achieved for me, because I remember coming to you early on and saying, look, we need to have a chat about my background, my heritage, and you suggested going on a BAME conference in Swanwick in October 2017, which changed my life and changed my heart.
It did. Do you remember? I think that was a key moment for you, actually, because I remember you came back to from that, and you said to me, Nick, I've never thought of myself as a BAME ordinand before. And you were quite cross with me, I think, for sending you at that point. And I remember saying to you that perhaps being a BAME ordinand and being a face that could be seen by others and showing others what can be done was part of your calling. And I remember us having that discussion in my little office at Bishop's Court, and I remember you leaving, and I remember thinking, I really hope I've said the right thing to Ben there. And I think I did, because you've had a fantastic ministry already, haven't you? In just showing other people what can be done.
And I think that's important. I remember I didn't realise how important it was to be a BAME candidate for ministry until my last Sunday, when a little boy said to his mum, who was black, he said, "Oh, what's Ben going to do?" And she went, he's going to train to be a priest. And he genuinely said, looking up to his mum, and said, "Oh, there's somebody going to look like me in the church." And I looked at him and laughed, because I thought he was joking. I thought it was a kid's remark. Actually, afterwards, he was genuinely being serious. It was such a sincere response. And I thought, wow. And that really I found very profound and moving, because, as you know, I'm adopted and come from a white clergy family background. And actually, I found myself in Manchester Diocese through being in the part of a diverse church, going to the conferences. I mean, you linked me up with somebody, a BAME vocations advisor as well, which I found important. I think it wasn't solely for the road of vocation and discerning whether or not it was right for me to train for ordained ministry. But I think, if I'm right in saying, this is a journey about finding ourselves too, as we journey along the road to college and beyond, and to BAP, really. It's not just about our future in front of us. We learn more about ourselves and us as we go forward.
Yeah, and that's the same for all ordinands, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where it's important, though, is as a BAME ordinand, if, as you learn about yourself and your calling and the church doesn't feel a good fit, then we need to be prepared to say, well, is that because this isn't what you're called to, or is that because the church needs to change in such a way that your calling can flourish? And I think that's the really key thing here.
I think, well, because obviously since the 25th of May, and as a diocese, the Manchester Diocese, there has been a big response to the passing of George Floyd and what's happened afterwards. And I think that's been very positive. As a BAME ordinand within our diocese, I felt really supported in this. It's a dark, and I think actually it's quite a dark and harrowing time. And I think as things do take place, news sometimes it can evolve and change. At the moment, things are a bit quiet, but it's going to come back, because unfortunately, these men are going to have to be tried for what happened, and then it's going to come back again. But I feel that the diocese response was really appropriate and very sincere. And I remember I was invited to Protesting Through Prayer. Yeah. And we just were all together. I mean, on this.
That was a really moving night, wasn't it?
And it wasn't, and it was just, it was very moving. It was very peaceful. And I felt the sense of God in that space. It was one of those moments when we saw, I don't like to use the word anarchy, but we saw a lot of different emotions and mixed feelings and behaviours taking place worldwide. And it felt that night there was an inner sense of peace in an outer sense of chaos. And that was really shown within our diocese. And I remember ringing you to discuss something, and you asked, how was I? And then I had to speak to your PA, Reverend Neil Whitaker, about something else. And he went, now put that aside, how are you? And it wasn't patronising. You both were genuinely asking how I was as in my emotions as this was, unfolding. And I found that really, really moving at the time, because then I did an interview with the Church Times, and I rang you very late one Sunday evening to discuss this. And I know for a fact, being in a vicarage household, being rang late on a Sunday evening is not the most, it's not the most enjoyable
Not
thing.
At all. You got me out of some rubbish TV that my daughter had chosen.
And once again, you were very supportive. And I think, and that's what I appreciate, because obviously there are, we know that the Church of England has, there has been a problem in the past, and which was, and I think it started to look at their failings, admitted that, especially with Justin Welby. But what we're doing is, I think, in this diocese is really impressive.
Let me ask you a question then, Ben. Yeah. So I think we do a reasonably good job at supporting all of our ordinands, and in this instance, we're talking about our BAME ordinands. We have, for the last number of years, had a significantly higher rate of BAME ordinands going into training than BAME people in our churches. So all of that sounds really positive. But I still think that there are huge swathes of the Christian population in Manchester where we're not making great impact with our vocations work. So I think we're doing all right once we've made that initial contact. The next stage is to be able to actually get into more communities, particularly amongst young men from various ethnicities, and say to them, trust us, we will work with you. The church needs you. God is calling you. let's see how we can do. How do we make that leap? How do we get to that next stage of the work?
I think as somebody who's gone through the process, it's about, I think, enabling the people who minister to the wider people, and having discussions. I think that's one of the things sometimes we forget to do. We sometimes expect people to come to us, but actually sometimes it's good to go out to them. And I think it's, I remember when I was first called to ministry and someone said, "Do you fancy being a vicar?" I was like, "No, because that's what my parents did." But actually those conversations months later, when I was approached, it made me not feel, it made me feel actually somebody cares, and somebody has seen something in me which is worthwhile. And I think we've got to find a way as people and as ministers in the church to be able to respond to the human need, and knowing that actually diversity is key. And it's I think it's through conversation, but I think it's through enabling the clergy and the laity around and seeing where they see potential in the conversations that they're having. Because, some people might think actually they feel called to something, but they don't know what. But actually having a conversation, speaking, seeing the different ideas that are on the table. Because another thing you mentioned is that you wanted to see people with less academic backgrounds, and you wanted to see more women, and then, you wanted to see an increase in many areas of vocations for our diocese. And but also you said about laity, because sometimes when you think of ministry, you think actually it's just for ordained ministry. And that's what I thought years ago. But actually, there's all forms of ministry, which I would say, Nick, that you are quite, you like discussions on all levels of ministry, not just ordained. I've come into your office, and before that, you've been speaking to somebody who perhaps is going into reader ministry or think about something else. And you've opened the door for them, whether that's male or female, black or white, Asian, minorities. And I think that's really positive. And it's having the wider conversations, which I think we're doing. But it's always an ongoing process, isn't it? I think it's something that we've got to prayerfully discern and seek as we move forward, especially post-COVID, is by talking, enabling the people who are with these people on an everyday basis, and going from there.
So let me ask you another question then. More specifically, what was the biggest hurdle you faced in the vocations process that you might not have faced, or you think you might not have faced, if you were white?
I think it was very interesting, because I remember we had realistic conversations. I remember asking you realistic questions, and Nick, you weren't going to romanticize the answers, and I was very much knew where I stood at some of the answers, which were national. It wasn't to do with you. It was, someone once said to me, you don't worry, you'll get through your training because you're black. You'll get through that because you're black. We need a special colour in. And it was sort of young and black. We need you, sort of thing. That's what I was known for. And actually,
You don't believe that, do you?
No, I don't. I wanted,
because it's really, it really makes me cross when I hear that, because you got through your BAP because they discerned, as did I, as did you, as did a lot of other people, that God was calling you to priesthood, and that was an obedient, realistic and informed calling, and for no other reason. And
I hope that actually as we journeyed together, and I journeyed with other colleagues, so I was on SEAMS, but there was other people. I'm very good friends now with a couple of people I went to BAP with from the diocese, and actually it sounds silly, but I wanted to be seen just like them. I didn't want it to be because actually, if the discernment journey meant that I wasn't called to the form of the priesthood, but something else, I wanted that to be because of that's what God's, that was what God decided with the help of others. I didn't want it to be also, I didn't want it just to be because, oh no, we'll put him through because he's black, because that's not who I am. That's not my whole identity. I am Ben.
But that's also not what would happen.
No, it wouldn't. And it really wouldn't. And you've got people making presumptions, and actually they're unfounded. And I think another thing was that actually, because of my educational history, that also, that put me in a place where actually I felt quite uncomfortable. Even, I remember our first meeting, I wasn't more worried about being BAME because that hadn't sort of come to me at the moment. It was coming to tell you the truth, which I didn't want to do, and say, look, my name's Ben and I've got no qualifications, what are we going to do? and you went, we're going to sort it. And that opened another door. And I think that was, and I felt that doors were opened. And speaking to other ordinands, BAME in our diocese and non-BAME, that the doors are opened if it's God's will, and if other people seek that it's the right thing to do. And I think, going back to your question, I think looking back now, I was quite concerned about going I think I was there's only 2 BAME candidates on my back. And I thought, and obviously I didn't have the educational history, and I was concerned perhaps for a second, would it put me back because of me being black, or would it put me forward because, we need something different? Or was it, it's all those things you think about when it's such a stressful time. But I genuinely believe that I was called to ministry for being Ben and Ben alone. And I remember saying to you, I think I said to you at the time, someone said I'd be quoted on, don't worry, you'll be recommended because you're black. And I think at the time, before I went, I wanted you to say, oh, that's true, that's fine because you are, and because obviously my future was unknown because my job was finishing in Manchester. So I wanted some sort of hope. And you weren't giving it. You said, no, that's not the truth. And you'll be recommended because you're Ben and that's who you are. And you'll be recommended for if that's your calling on your life. And that was really important to hear, I think. Obviously, the world has seen that we're in very different times. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we've also seen what happened in America on the 20th of May with George Floyd. How did you, when you initially saw that, and you thought about it, and we moved on with it, and you've seen that as times have changed, as the news has changed, as we've gone forward and seeing the outcomes and the worldwide anger and upset and wanting to see change, how have you personally, coming from let's say a white background, and how have you journeyed with that, seeing it from the outside, especially when you work with a lot of diverse people and you've got a lot of diverse candidates and ordinands?
I think two things come to mind. One is watching that TV report for the first time with my 11-year-old daughter. Mm. And seeing the total shock and disbelief on her face. Mm. Which I just, that was quite an important moment for me. Honestly, I don't think until this incident that I'd ever appreciated just how deep the hurt is for people. That would be my reflection, that I know that sort of things aren't always great and things have been wrong and that there's institutional bias and all that in various places, but I had never appreciated just how much hurt and pain and people were carrying, and carrying so gracefully, actually. I think it's been a big moment. And
finally, Nick, as we come to a close, how is your role as Nick and as the Director of Vocations, and moving forward, what would you like to see? What would you like to see a change? What would you like to what would you like to do to try and be part of this worldwide change? Perhaps here in the Manchester and here in the diocese. But is Nick the man as well?
Well, I think, as I said, we're doing okay with our BAME vocations, but we're not, it's not fixed. I often think that if only there was one big thing where I could say, there's this big racist stumbling block in the process, that would be so easy, because then we could just fix that. But it's not that. It's every little stage, everything seems a bit harder for some candidates, from that initial step forward to put hands up, to everything through the process. And so at the moment, we're addressing that by spending time with people, huge amounts of time with people. Particularly my colleague Erin, spends a great deal of time with candidates, helping them prepare for selection and to discern their vocation. What I'd love to get to is a point where we didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
where we didn't have to put extra time and resource into our BAME candidates. Not because I'm not delighted to do it, I am, but because we shouldn't need to.
No. And that's, I think, that should be our hope and one of our many prayers.
Yeah,
is to hope
indeed.
one day that we have an equal world, and a world a world where actually we all thrive together and all thrive as one, and that actually some of the conversations we're having now can be parked. I mean, I'm sitting on a couple of groups at the moment, and I'd like it to be the achievement one day that it's a task and finish group, and that one day it ends, and that
it does finish.
It does finish, and that we can see the our diocesan slogan really work: the church for a different world, but a world for a different world, and people for that different world.